The unprecedented sentencing of convicted racist Vicki Momberg. She was sentenced to an effective 2 years imprisonment for a 2016 incident during which she hurled racial abuse at a police officer. For more reaction to this groundbreaking ruling and, of course, the sentencing, we're now joined by the Minister responsible for Justice and Correctional Services, Advocate Michael Masutha. Minister, good morning to you. Thank you so much for coming through.
Morning, and morning to all the viewers at home.
This has been hailed as groundbreaking conviction and sentencing, but your reaction is as the department?
Well, we're very pleased, and let's acknowledge the bold step taken by the victim in this instance. It doesn't matter whether it was a police officer, we're all equal before the law. And of course, prosecution who decided to take this on through the courts. And I think this sends a positive message both to victims of racism as well as perpetrators, that the rule of law shall prevail in South Africa. So we're pleased with the outcome.
But in your observation, what is different in this particular case? I mean, as you and I were having this conversation of that criminal injury has always been there.
Yes.
But what's different?
Well, what's different is the aggravating element brought about by racial prejudice in this. We know that as a society we emerge from a history, an unenviable history of racial oppression, of racial exclusion and abuse. Mainly perpetrated by a white minority against a black majority. So given the continued unequal society that we have even beyond 1994 based on race, it becomes even more severe when somebody of a economically, if you like, dominant race uses this kind of racial slurs to mock those that continue to suffer under that legacy of orchestrated racially based inequality.
But do you personally think, Minister, the sentencing and conviction will sort of restore the level of what's left of South Africans' hope on the justice system? Many people have always been coming out to say, listen, our justice system is failing us. We know that currently there is a hate crime bill that's before Parliament. So is this a step in the right direction?
Well, it is. You'd recall that back in 2000, Parliament passed the Promotion of Equality and Prevention of Unfair Discrimination Act, which created the Equality Court, amongst others. And that court has been active in meting out civil relief to victims of, racism and other forms of hate conduct, hate-based conduct. However, we've come to realize that that has not been adequate and that criminal sanctions perhaps would send an even sterner message out into society that there is no longer a place in South Africa for this kind of behavior. So I think it should actually have that kind of a deterrent effect on to-be racist or current racists, because indeed racism continues to manifest itself in various forms in society, and where it is so explicit, we need to take concrete actions to deal with it.
Well, it certainly is still a big problem here in South Africa, but I think the question really, Minister, is what programs does your department have to address this program to stop these incidents from happening?
I think it takes the whole of society, starting with parents at home, how they raise their children, making sure that we act responsibly by teaching our children that we live in a different society. Schools have a role to play. And of course, the workplace is another area, call it the terrain of struggle, where there is continued racism and even sexism, because we shouldn't leave that out, is just as bad. So we do need to change the culture, the attitude across society. But for me, fundamental to all of this is the underlying socioeconomic legacy of socioeconomic inequality that continue to be pervasive. And each time we try as government to introduce programs to try and tackle it, it's as if we're pouring water in the sand, in a hole in the sand. So I think that if we can tackle effectively the underlying socioeconomic inequalities in society, that I believe will have a much stronger impact on attitudes, so that people begin to realize that we are genuinely equal and begin to treat each other as such.
I think it goes back to the issue of education. Are our people educated enough to know when it is time to stop these incidents from occurring? If you go to your deepest rural areas, your farms, for example, that is where these things are happening mainly, and they are not even reported. So my question again is, what programs does your department have in addressing such?
Well, look, we have various human rights awareness programs. I was meeting with the EU delegation on Monday to discuss continued funding, which is channeled to many NGOs via the Human Rights Foundation. And it's been a partnership that was initiated by President Mandela back, I think, in 1996, and it has endured till this day. A lot of resources have been going into that program. And of course, we have various campaigns at different times which are aimed at promoting the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and human rights generally. But like I said, I think that it takes more than just education.
Problem, yes.
We need to address the root causes, which I believe are embedded in the inenviable legacy of apartheid that we inherit from the past.
All right, Minister, we'll leave this conversation here for now, but thank you so much for coming through.
You're most welcome.
Thank you so much indeed to our Minister responsible for Justice and Correctional Services, as well as Constitutional Development, Advocate Michael Masutha, of course, giving his reaction on the sentencing of convicted racist Vicki Momberg. We're taking a quick ad break here on Morning Live. When we come back, we'll take you back to the chambers at the Nelson Mandela Bay Metro.